Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Paul D'Ambrosio, and I teach Chinese philosophy at East China Normal University, where the四海为学Collaborative Learning Project is based. I want to welcome you all to our 23rd roundtable and our 79th event since 2022. Today we are hosting three graduate students discussing the Zhuangzi and Post-Truth. They are Benjamin Birkenstock from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Anastasia Meimaridi from the Chinese University, from East China Normal University, and Tyler Neenan from the University of Chicago. Uh, it has become a tradition here at 四海为学 to give younger scholars a chance to be part of some high-profile academic events. This is actually our first event where we're giving the opportunity to all younger scholars to be part of the event. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to be part of future events, please let me know. This event today will be 2 hours in total, and we will end promptly at 10 a.m. Beijing time. Before getting things started, I just want to say a few things about the 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project hopes to distinguish itself from some of the less productive conventional practices found in contemporary academia. As posted on our website, we are not interested in male peacocks, in jerks, or in any form of egoism or self-promotion. We hope to curb all types of aggressive and "look at me, I'm smarter than you," or "don't I know so much," and similar attitudes sometimes found in academic exchanges. We might even go so far as to say that we hope to be the counterbalance for the negative attitudes sometimes found in so-called blind reviews. While there is a time and a place for anonymity, or at least the appearance of anonymity, communication in academia should have just as much time and place for speaking to one another in more congenial and community-forming settings. The neologism 四海为学, which was created by Robin Wong, is a play on 四海为家, and we hope to keep this idea of 四海为家at the foreground of all of our events. The 四海为学 Collaborative Learning Project seeks to accomplish these shifts in orientation during academic exchanges by encouraging productive communication, humble discussions, real questions, and responses that are open and honest. We hope to foster environments where people truly learn from and with one another. So I want to thank everyone for being here, especially Anastasia, Tyler, and Ben, for sharing your ideas with us. And so I think the order for today would be Ben will start off by giving his discussion, and then we'll have responses from Anastasia and Tyler. Then Anastasia will give her discussion. We'll have responses from Ben and Tyler. Then Tyler will give his discussion. We'll have responses from Ben and Anastasia. And then we'll open things for questions from the audience. So again, my apologies for not having your short bios, but maybe you could just introduce yourselves before you speak. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, Professor D'Ambrosio. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, so I have a PowerPoint, so is it okay if I share screen? Great, let me try. Okay, how is that working for everyone? It's okay? Great. Um, yeah, okay, my name is Ben Birkenstock. No relation to the shoe company directly, which is why I'm reliant on your generous tax dollars to fund my scholarship. Um, I'm a PhD student of David Chai's. He's my supervisor at CUHK in Hong Kong. I'm really enjoying my program. I'm in my third year, entering what may be hopefully my final year, but famous last words. Not too much else to self-promote here. So maybe I'll jump right in. Yeah, so 10 minutes, I'll try to keep it at that. This is essentially a presentation of my sort of thesis proposal where I'm hoping to go. I haven't started writing yet, my dissertation. But it's focusing on Jikang. And just a brief disclaimer as we go in, Jikang is a third century CE Chinese writer, thinker, scholar, philosopher in the Xuanxue tradition, sometimes called Neo-Taoism, sometimes called a synthesis between Confucianism and Taoism, although Professor D'Ambrosio has pushed back against that a little bit, at least with Huangbi. Um, and yeah, so I'm not directly presenting on Zhuangzi. I also uh, want to say that what you call a philosopher in the case of Xuanxue is always interesting. He's also a poet, maybe even more famous for his poetic writings, like his friend Ranji than as a thinker per se, but I'm going to try to show that he has some really interesting ideas and very practical ones. And so to get us started here, I'm going to use a quote from the Zhuangzi. Jikang himself said that Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi were his teachers. He spent not an affluent but an idyllic youth, indulged by his parents to just read Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi and drink wine with his friends. And so he is a syncretistic or syncretic thinker, but certainly Zhuangzi is a foremost influence. So I'm going to be talking a bit about paradoxes, which is one of my favorite topics, and nothing or wu or negation, however you want to look at it. And I think there's this theme in Zhuangzi of it happens sometimes where Zhuangzi gets the last word, but seems to almost lose the argument. And there's these two famous stories I'll use as an example. This one, right? I won't read it in much detail, but Zhuangzi says, "Look at these happy fish." Huizi says, "Whence, right? Do you know the fish are happy? You're not a fish." Zhuangzi says, "You're not me. Whence do you know that I don't know fish's happiness?" Huizi responds, "I'm not you. So yes, I don't know you, but you're not a fish. So by the same token, you don't know fish's happiness." And then Zhuangzi kind of does this weird, on the surface, again, very simplistic thing. Well, when you said whence, that presumes that I already know it, right? So it seems like he's kind of it's very tongue in cheek, right? And much ink has been spilled trying to show how Zhuangzi comes out on top here. But I think a very surface level reading is he's just kind of um, seeded the point that we can't really that not knowing the other's perspective works against him just as much as for him in this case. So we'll come back to that. Another famous uh, contentious Taoist or Zhuangzian maybe position is that of Wu Qing, right? Of emotion, affect, uh, essence, even feeling. And Huizi says, can a person be without affect? And Zhuangzi says, yes. Huizi, how can you call it that a person, someone without emotions? And Zhuangzi says, this is not what I mean, whatever this is, by not having emotions. I mean um, someone who does not let liking and disliking harm, uh, interiorly harm their body. Um, but follows Ziran and does not increase or benefit life. And then Huizi comes right back and says, okay, how can not benefiting life, um, if you're not benefiting life, how can you even maintain or have a body? Which is the very thing that you said that not having motions is supposed to be good for, which is hurting your body. But the point of a body is life. So if you're not about life, then what's the point of a body? And again, Zhuangzi kind of here on the surface, it's almost like he seeds the point by just repeating himself. He just goes back to say, yeah, the Tao involves not hurting yourself on the inside. It's not hurting the inside of your body or not interiorly hurting your body. Okay, so what's going on here? In both cases, it seems Huize has pointed out a sort of paradox in Zhuangzi's argument. Um, and in both cases, we have something related, somewhere situated between cognition and affection, knowledge, human faculties of knowing and wanting. Um, so briefly, I might skip this actually because um, I'm working with some contemporary sources to talk about uh, cognitive biases and cognitive limitations in empirical psychology. And there's two problems. There's, on the one hand, there's the idea that if research has posited that humans have a lot of biases, racist biases, selfish biases, self-serving, self-overrating biases. But how do you know that the researcher themselves, in order to establish their research, wasn't subject to the same bias, and therefore their research doesn't actually show that we have a bias? Um, Similarly, so Mugg and Khalidi call this the cognitive self-reflexive paradox. Similarly, Jikang um, seems to be a paradoxical or self-contradictory thinker himself. In one part of one essay, he says, all that wisdom knows cannot come close to all that it does not know. And a few moments later, he says, why is the hidden allowed to be greater than what we know? Rhetorically, so saying, responding to someone who critiqued that previous sentence, he's saying, wait a moment, why we can know everything? Why do you say that we can't know everything? Same with desire. One point in one essay, he says, when desires are victorious, the body withers, and wisdom, or this 智慧的智, maybe intelligence, maybe will maybe reason, depends on how you look at it, is beautiful, and the beautiful increases life without coveting it. Um, and then later on, he says, it's the constant use of wisdom, not desire, that causes calamity. So what's going on here? I think a key lies in what we call, rather than the cognitive, the affective self-reflective bias paradox, which is, in a nutshell, um, how do you know that what you like today won't be what you dislike tomorrow, or what you want will not turn out, once you get it, will not change into something you don't want? Um, so, Jikang's solution in 3 minutes. I look a bit at his psychology, his of yin yang, which is actually not dan. So the heart responds to affect. But I'm saying that this reflects his anthropology as a whole, in that all human faculties, whether cognitive, affective, intentional, perceptive, are really just varying levels of sort of intention or motivation. And this is actually something common, I think, across Chinese philosophy, classical Chinese philosophy from Xunzi. It's a lot of, actually, ironically, and Mengzi and others, Zhuangzi too, that, so for example, desire, is your immediate revulsion or indifference to things, or attraction. Emotions are sort of the longer lasting impressions formed by anticipated, gained, or lost objects of desire. And then wisdom and rationality is actually just part of the same spectrum, but it's longer term. It's the aspect of intentionality, affectivity, being affected by the environment, that is able to, or that tries to predict future responses based on past ones, and therefore tells the emotions, the desires, and ultimately the behavior, what to pursue and what to avoid. So, Jikang's solution is to, for Jikang, the problem and the solution both is what you might call the rational or the judgmental aspect. I'm using this all, this is something I'd like feedback on, how to translate zhi in different parts. Um, Jikang uses, for Jikang, the problem of our emotions is that they get overfixated by desire by the predictive aspect. But the predictive aspect is thus also the part that can recognize its own problem, the problem of emotions and desires, which are always already um, sort of intermixed and hence attached, excessively attached through this judgmentory, predictive, anticipatory aspect that they have. So again, we're not really talking about three different things here. It's that the anticipatory aspect of our desire motivation has always already excessively attached that desire and motivation to objects of desire. And so it itself plays this role of reducing itself. So I'll read these two quotes because I think they sum it up nicely, and then I'll be almost done. Ultimate principle is truly minute, yet the world drowns it out. However, one can only be aware of it after seeking it in one's body and knowing it by examining it in external things. So he's not anti-examination, reason, empirical evidence, even. However, such being the case, prosperity, wine, they all have a time when they can be let go of. If tranquility and calmness, tian, this is this key concept for him, are taken as perfect taste, then wine and beauty will not satisfy people's respect. And again, there's this sort of self-evidential aspect of this that um, desires, when they are natural, they themselves won't want something that is harmful to them. That's that second quote. Okay, so really quickly, let me wrap up here. How does he solve these paradoxes? So those quotes that I had before, why is the hidden allowed to be greater than what we can know? It's because combining all the things we have successfully verified, we will say there are more than what we know. So empirically, there's always more we can successfully verify, we can examine. But to know this but not yet reach their principle is to not look for hidden by means of the seen. Um, and even if someone does this, there will be times when they're wrong. So in other words, our wisdom or our judgment is uh, empirically limited, but it's also empirically infinite. There's always more it can know. And this itself is a principle or a coherence that we can establish. It's a sort of paradoxical, self-undermining coherence of knowledge or of judgment that every determinacy can always be negated or it can always be supplemented. But once you know this, you retain this kind of tian, this kind of tranquility. Again, just to solve the other paradox of wisdom versus desire, why is wisdom sometimes bad, sometimes good, and vice versa? The ancients, the ones he looks up to, they made knowledge stop at their bodies. Again, that Zhuangzi term. But here, if you look at the Chinese in the very last, wisdom is beautiful because it does yi sheng, which is the thing Zhuangzi was against. But bu, I think that's ci, but I could be wrong how to read that last character. Yi sheng or bu ci, or without coveting. So wisdom does benefit life, but only insofar as it is not attached to any finite object, including life itself. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I've already gone over time. Thank you so much for your patience.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Ben. We actually have one of our more faithful四海为学 participants, Angelia. She'll take over as the chair. So thanks, Angelia.
Okay, hi everyone. I will take the chair in the second part. So thank you for Benjamin Birkenstock for your lecture. And then we'll proceed to the first discussion with Anastasia Meimaridi. Yeah. So do you have
Thank
any
you very
questions? I
much.
think the entire discussion should take about 8 minutes.
Yeah. Um, Thank you very much. And thank you, Ben, for your presentation. I think so about the hidden and why is it better than what is not hidden. I think that this aspect of the hidden thing also has a lot more, a lot to do with our presentations as well, and we didn't exactly predict that. So I was thinking about the paradox because you said that Zikang is not exactly anti-wisdom, but he also says that wisdom, it's not desires that cause the problem, the calamity, but wisdom. And then he tries to solve the paradox in a way that I think is a little bit paradoxical as well. I mean, he's trying to to solve it, and that's, well, the fact that I'm saying that he's trying to solve it is a little bit, he's trying to be wise too, right? I don't know if this is something that can be problematized in your paper. I don't know if it's a paper yet or if you're working on it. That he's being very maybe analytical. Well, when he says that wisdom is what causes calamity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point. That's an interesting point in this whole with the Zhuangzi too, and I think I have this I mentioned this a little bit with your previous presentation, and we were discussing that I don't think the Zhuangzi is, anti-language or anti-reason, but rather it's sort of paradoxical about language and reason, or ironic, or however you want to look at it. But Zhuangzi does tend to land more on the sort of side of the Wuzhi, Wuqing kind of spectrum. And one reason that the Xuanxue people are sometimes labeled as these syncretists or these Confucian Taoist synthesizers is because sometimes they sound, including Jikang, like they land more on the Zhi side, or the pro-Qing side, the pro-Zhi side, or whatever, whatever human faculty or Confucian virtue that Taoism is meant to sort of play with. Now, having said that, I do think, I mean, it's interesting if you look at this passage here. So desires are victorious, the body withers. Given this desire and life cannot coexist for long, which as is the case for him and the body. So here, first he's critiquing desires, then he's critiquing knowledge too. No, then he's saying in this passage sort of that knowledge is, or let's say wisdom, is beneficial. But he's saying it in such a way that, in a way, I'm sort of, again, maybe this is part of my initial disclaimer. I'm not claiming to purely represent the only interpretation of Jikang, but I'm trying to kind of use his philosophy to build some psychological wisdom, if you will. I kind of talk about it as he's using wisdom to undermine itself. So you have wisdom. Wisdom is just that part of your overall constitution as a conscious sentient being that predicts stuff. But it can also predict its own predicting and realize that its predictions are wrong, all of the time, not literally, but so often wrong. And that so much of our anxiety comes from the predictive aspect of our desiring and our emotions. But when you look at Jikang himself, he's not saying literally like 一知去知 or something like that. Use wisdom to discard wisdom, or he doesn't have that paradoxical, literally formulation that I'm sort of attributing to him. Rather, here is saying the ancients. I've got it because I shortened the quote here, but 古人视之正气身不容于外, like they 不应于外, they made knowledge stop. And here he's also using knowledge, not the other 知, but so it's not quite clear what they're using to stop excessive predictive deliberation. Are they using predictive, or is Jikang himself using reason to undermine reason? Is there some kind of higher perspective? Again, he talks about tranquility, 恬淡的恬, or 和谐的和 a lot. Is there some kind of, he talks about li, like coherence principle a lot. And it's almost like maybe there's some higher level that is not wisdom or not knowledge per se. So I think you can read it either way. Either he's using wisdom, the predictive aspect of our cognitive affective faculties to undercut itself, to reduce the excessive prediction and cognition. Or you can say he thinks there's some higher spiritual level that we should use to undercut it. Does that make sense? Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm still figuring that out.
no, of course, of course. Can you go back just to the slide where you have the emotions, the prediction, and
Yes.
wisdom? Mm, Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, it does make sense. Um, I was just wondering if desires play a role, because this anticipation you're talking about, predicting what our future emotions will be. Can we be cut off from this desire entirely? Is there any point to do that, or is there just an orientation that to reflect on it, that stay on this, we have this desire, it's okay, and then how we approach it will be important, because it will either be the result will be calamity, or we can just use this attitude to direct it a little bit better.
Can you repeat the part about we just have this desire and it will never go away? Which desire is that? Sorry.
Anticipation, that we want to predict things.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So your question is, do we have to either accept that we will always sort of want to predict things and learn to be okay with it, or do we find a way to like transcend it altogether?
Yes.
Something like that? Okay, yeah, that's a really interesting question. Okay, so let's go to a different quote I had to kind of skip over a bit quickly. Um, um, oh no, wait, it was actually on that same page that I just left. Right here. So it's the first quote under desires. So desiring without deliberation, 不虑而遇者, 欲无而当, matches things encountered in a way that is satisfactory, and once satiated, leaves nothing over, leaves nothing unfulfilled in the desire. And actually, the part that's missing to shorten the quote to fit it here is this. He says, 不虑而遇 行之动者, or something like that. So to desire without 虑, or however you want to translate that, is the activity or the movement or the stimulation of 性, like 人性, like our human nature. So there is a sense in which you can, I think for him, he wants to get back to this state where your desires encounter, or let's not even use desires, where your cognition, your embodied cognition, where you as a person, um, as a bodyful being, encounter things, um, and you desire them or you're repulsed by them, but after the encounter, your desire is satisfied. This is even in a context where he's talking about like sleep and food, right? Uh, you sleep, you get enough sleep, and then you move on. Or maybe you don't get enough sleep, you're tired the next day, you're grumpy, you find a way to deal with it and you move on. Or food and that kind of thing. So he wants to get to this kind of very, in a way, pristine Tao Shenren or the Shengren of the Jikangian sage. Um, so in a way, he does want to transcend the anticipation, but I think he. So this is something I'm curious about too. Maybe I should also ask you how you see it, or how you see it, maybe in a Zhuangzian sense. But here he's got this is a great passage where he talks about both wisdom and desire in one breath. The sage recognizes that intelligence or wisdom, again, that's the jur there, lacks constancy and harms life, and that desire chases after things and injures human nature. Thus, whenever wisdom is used, the sage gathers it in with tranquility. Um, it's not saying that the sage doesn't use wisdom. So again, I think you can say this might be attributing things to Jikang, and I hope to discuss a little bit both with sort of contemporary sort of cognitive science and even maybe some phenomenology, a la like Merleau-Ponty stuff. Again, we're dividing up what is really a spectrum. Whenever you encounter something, there is whenever you perceive something, right, it's never just neutral or uninterpreted. Perception is always this kind of motivation or interpretation. So whenever you perceive something, there's this aversion or desire or indifference, which really is a form of aversion, perhaps. Um, so you either have affection or aversion, and that immediately has this tiny moment of prediction, right? To like something is to hope that in the next moment we'll keep liking it and then get it. So every movement of Yu already has a tiny bit of zhi in it, and same with Qing. Qing is almost like the zhong between Yu and zhi on this kind of scale here. So yeah, I don't. That doesn't fully answer your question, but that's kind of how I'm envisioning it. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do need some because I don't really know too many things about Jikang. I do need some time to read a little bit more. Um, but yeah, in the Zhuangzian sense, I mean, I think our time's up, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about this, that you want to get something because you want it, or yeah, in the Zhuangzian sense, I think maybe he would disagree, or that wouldn't be the case. But yeah, thank you. You definitely answered some of the questions and actually made me want to read Jikang a little bit more. So thank you very much.
Okay, so now we proceed to the next discussion. Maybe we can discuss about this question later on. So I guess Taylor Neenan also has some questions to answer, and you also have 8 minutes to finish the entire discussion.
Okay, that's a lot of pressure. Thanks, Angela. Wonderful to see you all. Very happy to share this space with Anastasia and Ben. And thanks again for Professor D'Ambrosio's invitation. So I don't know a ton about Ranjiti Kang. I want to sort of steer us back in the direction of the first slide that you put up. So a little bit of background on this. Ben was the one to propose the idea of post-truth in the Zhuangzi as kind of a uniting thread that could sort of bind through all of our different presentations and topics. Okay, actually, sorry, the Wu-Ting paradox, is that what you call it? I think it's the next one. Yes, okay. So I wanted to ask you about this. And so obviously the topic is Zhuangzi post-truth. I mean, we have to give these people, we have to deliver on what they opened this Zoom link and expected to come and see. I think I would imagine that there's not too much disagreement that there's no truth in Zhuangzi in the sense of any like external relationship of the proposition to some external measure, whether that's thought or notion, or whether that's some independent reality or limit. And yet it doesn't seem clear to me that there is no truth to be spoken of in the Zhuangzi, or that we have to adjust the parameters of the conversation. So this passage has always struck me as strange and interesting, especially in the context of its the way that it reflects off of the basic paradox of the Chiwalun. So I'm especially interested now in the couple of moments from this that you underlined for us, so that 不以好恶内上提升，勿以好恶内上提升. So it's seemingly um, there's this idea that that there's a state, some kind of internal state, and I am free insofar as I do not allow sure and fei likes and dislikes, even truth and falsity, if we want to dress them up in that way, to damage you internally, right? So there's some internal state that can be free of sure and fei. Like there are like shures and feis bouncing off of you, and somehow there's some kind of in your heart of hearts, there's some space that remains immune to the impact. Now, I wonder about this, especially because don't we hear in the Chiwalun that it's impossible to be free of shures and feis, right? So, I mean, we're dealing with slightly different kind of resonances here, bouncing between the cognitive, the linguistic, the affective, right? But if so, I'm thinking here in particular. I'm going to drop it in the chat. I happen to have it on hand. Of this passage. It's from Guoxiang's commentary to the Chiwalun, and I think he does a really nice job of sort of encapsulating the central paradox at stake here. So again, we're dealing with this moment from the Huizi question and the possibility of an internal state that is said to be free of sure and fei. So I'm just going to kind of do a sort of cursory translation here of that Guoxiang quote from the Chiwalun commentary that I just dropped in the chat. So if we were to say that there are no Shurfei judgments, then I do not know whether this would be similar or dissimilar to someone saying that there are Shurfei judgments. One may want to say that the two of us, i.e. the person who says that there are no Shurfei and that there are Shurfei, are alike. But since I'm affirming that there are no Shurfei judgments, while the other negates the same claim, we are clearly different. So in trying to spell out the way that we are alike, it turns out that we are exactly unalike or dissimilar. And yet, though what each of us affirms and negates is different, nevertheless, we cannot avoid there being something sured and something fade, something taken to be true and something taken to be otherwise, taken to be false. And in this respect, again, the two of us are alike, right? So the basic idea here is that if we want to say, how is Zhuangzi avoiding falling into the trap of his own paradox from the Chiwalun, right? How is it possible to speak of a state that is free of sure and fei, of truth and falsity, if in fact, just as soon as we try to spell out what that state would entail, if I want to say that there is no truth, right? Let's say that I want to defend the proposition that Zhuangzi is post-truth, and that for Zhuangzi there is no such thing as a definitive sure and a definitive fei. I nevertheless have to affirm something and negate something else, right? So even the attempt to extricate ourselves from the game of truth and falsehood only ends up recommitting us to some investment in the truthfulness, in the sureness of our own position and the feyness of the others. So I guess how do you read this paradox of the Wuqing? How could it be possible to be free of sure and fei, and what does that tell us about truth in the Zhuangzi, or post-truth, I guess?
I I was gonna look up the support translation and I realized I forgot. I looked up another one and like some stuff and for the 是非无所谓情也 and that I was pretty certain, oh yeah, this is usually actually read as this is not what I mean by Qing, rather than And I'm realizing Zipporah does this too. 是非 are not what I mean by Qing. So I was actually kind of reading it as sure, this fei is not what I mean by Qing, rather than sure fei are not what I mean by Qing. Ultimately, that's probably of no consequence, at least given you and me have enough shared presuppositions here, I think. But just a funny funny note. Um, okay, so let me briefly, yeah, because I didn't ran out of time to get back to this. Um, what I was gonna say is something like that these almost, at least from the perspective of sort of a propositional back and forth argument between Zhuangzi and Huishi, these almost non-secular responses here and in the fish story, um, are what I would say is him, uh, Moro Yiming or whatever, using Ming in the Anastasian reading of Ming as the obvious. Um, as acknowledging that they've reached a dialectical impasse, that where to say that to have no shifei, no inclinations, that's a great word. I was just looking this up as you're talking to Zippor, and he uses inclinations. That's another thing I want to get people's feedback on, not only how to translate 智慧 to 智, but 情, 情感 to 情 here in my reading of Jikang, and inclination is another good one. Anyway, so it doesn't really matter whether you read it as judgment. Shifei is more like the wisdom side. That's more like the deliberative, anticipatory judgment side in Jikang. Or if you read it as sort of just base impulses, which already presuppose a sort of, deliberation, desirable, not desirable, or yeah. So that to say that they are bad, why does Zhuangzi say that that is bad? Because it hurts the body. Um, and in a very simple way, maybe there's some inner core that it's supposed to precept, but I'm just maybe even literally reading that as 不以好恶内害其身, like doesn't it hurts the vessel or the being, um, but does not get, increase life, or does not maybe get obsessed with survival. That's already a paradox. How you, Zhuangzi, are valuing sort of value relativity, right? Because you think it's good for you, but you've already thereby admitted that you don't believe in something being good for you. And Huizi picks up on that, right? 不一生何以有其身? And Zhuangzi is repeating it, not, and this is how I read the fish story too, not as either an evasion or an acknowledgement of law, losing the debate, one way or the other. Rather, it's just saying, yeah, this is just a paradox. This is just, the paradox of Shi and Fei, the paradox of desire and value. To not have values is a value. To, not have sure and fei is a sure. To not have determinacy, to be indeterminate is a determinacy. And Zhuangzi is just being like, yeah, great. That's it. We can go either way here, and that's the beauty of it. So that's the long and short of it. And then the Jikangian part would be that somehow that results in this sort of ataraxia, if you will, this tiandan, this state. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I think we could even add to this in light of today's topic that the very statement or proposition that there is no truth qua external fact of the matter is itself a commitment, right? Like I have to extract myself from the disputatious welter of sure and fei judgments in order to pretend to assume that the sort of metaposition that would entitle me to say that there is no definitive sure fei, right? That would just be another sure and another fei, right? So I guess maybe I forgot to look to see what time we started this, but maybe just a quick question before we move to Anastasia. But is Zhuangzi post-truth, do you think? What would it mean to say that Zhuangzi is post-truth in your mind?
All right, thanks for keeping me accountable to my clickbait title there. But yeah, I mean, again, I think that's the thing, right? The post-truth thing. I'm sure we'll get into this more with your presentation as well. The response to the post-truth moment is not to either go back to some conservative reactionary truth. It's also not to just give up on the notion of truth altogether, but to dive deeper into the post-truth and be like, embrace it so wholeheartedly that in fact you can see it both as truth or as post-truth. Yeah.
Yeah. 是一无穷，非一无穷, right?
Yeah.
Great. I assume we're at time. I don't know if anyone's keeping time, if time can be kept. Angela, do you wanna jump back in and take us to the next speaker? Is Angela gone?
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. So our next speaker is Anastasia.
Anastasia. I'm a PhD student at East China Normal University. I just finished my second year. So what I'm going to present here today is actually part of my dissertation project. Sorry, I just need to share my screen. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about curiosity in the Zhuangzi. Curiosity is a project I've been working on for my dissertation in other teaching texts as well, but today we're just going to talk about Zhuangzi. And more specifically, the passages have to do with some kind of distance or vastness, height, extreme situations, or even strange situations. Then we will see how they shape inquiry. A little bit about curiosity. So curiosity is usually treated as a movement towards from not knowing towards knowing. And in this sense is tied to completion or closure. So we also have another, and this is basically more in the Western sense and specifically in classical Greek philosophy, that we have a lack, which is not knowing, and we want to possess or even seek or pursue or even possess knowledge. And inquiry helps us in that case. And we also have another different word, which is wondering, thavmazin in Greek. So wondering is actually, curiosity is a later term that came after wondering. In the beginning, we just had wondering as a word. So some people might think that these are very separable because wonder is supposed to be a preliminary stage of curiosity, that we see something and we are in awe with the world and we are just in this stage of wonder. And then we might actually proceed and be curious about it and ask questions about it. But I don't think it's very productive, or it doesn't really matter for my project to separate them very strictly. And as we will see actually in the passages that I'm going to present, they arise quite together. So I'm not going to strictly separate them. I just wanted to point them out. So in the Zhuangzi, curiosity is not something that aims toward closure, but instead it is placed in situations, at least in this text, that understanding is stretched and not completed. So we have encounters, we have different kinds of passages, but here we will see passages that have to do with excess or vastness or strangeness that destabilize our familiar grips to understanding and give rise to wonder and curiosity. So I will begin with the first passage that has to do. It is from Xiao. It has to do with Jianwu, who asks Lian Shu some questions because he heard some words that he couldn't do. That was frightened by the words that he heard, and he said that they were like the Milky Way, even though I don't know if this is a good translation for this here, that cannot be traced to its beginning or end. So he says that far away on the hill of Huye, there is a spirit-like man, and then he goes on to describe him, and he has some spirit-like characteristics that are not very human, and that he rambles and enjoys himself around the four seas. So here the passage is clearly structured through images of vastness or remoteness and excess that place this figure, the spirit-like man, beyond our ordinary conception of understanding. And so I think here distance is we can say a philosophical strategy that's not just about the space or the image. It's also an epistemical, because it highlights what eludes our full understanding, and so it creates the condition for curiosity, because if we totally unclear on something, we're not interested and so not curious about it. But if we think that we know something, we are also not curious, because then we fall into our Shuhei or Chengxing ideas, our biases. So we're not actually very open or curious about these things. So what eludes our full understanding gives rise to wonder and curiosity. And at the same time, this space also has another job it means that it opens up space for new aspects and new things to emerge. And also the spirit-like man himself remains sort of imaginable because he's a man, but also his characteristics cannot be fully assimilated to our ordinary ideas or understanding. So I think this image does not just provide knowledge, but opens a field of inquiry, and this is quite clear from the answer he gets to these questions, let's say. So he says, Lian Shu answers to him, and he criticizes the senses, but also the intelligence which we use to evaluate things is also criticized. And also there's an example that says that knowledge is context dependent when we talk about the man of stone who makes ceremonial cups, but then he goes to another place and these cups do not make sense anymore. So I think this passage also shows that when we encounter something that is very far away from us, in the sense of also metaphorical sense, we should not judge, but rather just stay within this unfamiliarity for a little bit longer and reflect on our limits of our own understanding. And of course, as we said about the post-truth, that there are no shared facts, but knowledge is context dependent. This definitely has some echo in the post-truth context. The second passage is Huangdi, who ascends to the height of the Kunlun mountain. And here there is no specific question, but the fact that he's searching his pearl that he lost is, I think, a very implicit and subtle, but a way to say that he's looking for something. And here in this passage, the Yellow Emperor, of course, again, he moves through these remote regions, and then he employs different kind of knowledge to find what he lost, but they all fail, and what attains to sorry, I forgot my word. The person, not the person, the figure who finds his pearl is purposelessness, which is what is closest, we might say, to vagueness or indeterminacy. So I think here the passage changes from this spatial image to what I also called before this epistemic distance, because there is a persistent gap between what is sought and the means available to grasp it. And even when we think we found it, it's actually purposelessness who found it, and Huangdi himself finds this very strange. So did he actually find it? Did he not find it? This is very vague, I think, here. So I think we also do not move towards certainty, but the limits of our of structured knowledge are also very much exposed here. And then the last passage is the passage that knowledge, the figure of knowledge itself, rambles towards the region of dark water, also ascends to the height of the imperceptible slope, and then knowledge starts to ask a very structured set of questions about to know the Tao, how to attain it, how to follow it. So the expectation is clearly that there should be some kind of method or procedure or way or and knowing how to understand Tao. However, Dam Binachon does not respond. He later forgets to respond. Then finally, Huang Di, he responds, but then again, he doesn't really say talk about the method, because he says things like to dwell nowhere and do nothing is the first step toward resting in the Tao. So that's his response. So I think that across all of these encounters, inquiry once again does not progress toward a stable answer. It repeatedly encounters limits of what structured question can deliver. And I think that contemporary discourse often assumes that the more information that we have, the more answers, or the better questions we have, this automatically means that people will understand more and this is better. But here, this is also a question. And also the way that the questions are asked is criticized. So I think that distance has a double job here, or maybe more than two jobs, because we realize that there are so many, when we go higher and higher, we understand that there are so many possibilities, unlimited possibilities that we might encounter, but which is also unsettling because we're not, sorry, it is epistemically uncertain. Sorry, give me a moment.
Okay, it looks like she just got kicked out, but she should be back any second. You're muted, Anastasia.
Sorry, something happened with my internet. I don't know. Sorry. Let me share. Yeah, actually, this is my conclusion. So I think that these images are actually what their job is to loosen our grip to our familiar categories of understanding, and they also produce a field of uncertainty in which inquiry unfolds. So in the Zhuangzi, these images of the distance, the vastness, the height, the depth, support this kind of openness and engagement. And it is precisely through this openness that new things have also the space to emerge, which is a more Laodian maybe thought. And also, I think that the distance has also another kind of job here, because I think that this distance can also produce some small moments of higher intelligibility where things are a little bit clear, but then again they collapse and they are unclear once again. And this is very important for curiosity and the fact that we are going to be more engaged with things when they are not actually very clear, but also they elude us. So I think in this way, the text reveals the limits of understanding and the unlimited possibilities of what can be known. So all in all, I think that inquiry under conditions of uncertainty is productive. And of course, we're not to live in this uncertainty or curiosity for an indefinite amount of time. I don't think that Zhuangzi celebrates that. But I think the suggestion is to just tolerate it for a little bit of time. And when we are clear on something for a little bit of time, we shouldn't assume that this clearness will stay and then fall back into the shufe that we might have. So thank you so much. This is my presentation, and I'm excited to talk about a little bit on shufe or post-truth ideas that you guys might have and Tyler mentioned as well before. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Anastasia. And then I guess Benjamin should pose some questions and you can have a discussion within 8 minutes. So Benjamin, please.
Thank you, Angela and Anastasia. Poor Tyler always gets to go last, but you know, 生人后其身而其身先, so well, yeah, it's a good thing. Okay, wow, this is really great. It's really cool to see also some of the development since the recent Sahai Weisha one that you did on the same topic. Really enjoyed that one too. I have a few questions, but just a clarification. At the very end, you said, I don't think Zhuangzi wants us to stay in something but tolerate for a little bit. Was that, sorry, just missed it. Was that he doesn't want us to stay in certainty but tolerate it for a little bit, or doesn't want us to stay in uncertainty but tolerate it for a little bit?
Uncertainty. But
Okay.
he also doesn't want to stay in certainty as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's just interesting because, like, your whole presentation, I mean, I love this aspect of it. Sounded like Zhuangzi is all about tolerating uncertainty. And then your last almost sentence was, but he doesn't need you to stay there too long beyond what you can bear, or like that's how I'm interpreting it. So yeah, how do you deal with that kind of paradox or whatever? Like that, yeah, that it seems like you're saying stay in the uncertainty, and then you're very end, you're like, you don't have to stay there too long or something.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, maybe that came out a little bit wrong. Maybe that's my problem. But what I mean is that we will have our biases, our views, and this is something we cannot escape from. So I think we do want to stay for a little bit, just as much as we realize that there are so many other things, so many like possibilities and unlimited. I don't really want to say the word. I'm going to say it, perspectives or knowledge. But then again, we are always in and out of that. Yeah, but maybe it sounded like I was saying, yeah. So basically, the argument is to stay a little bit longer, but not for an indefinite amount of time. And just make uncertainty your new certainty, or make the what Tyler said before, that we do not know we cannot know Shufe, and then this becomes very strict. And so we see discussions today that people are very actually strict about their views on, even though they say that there are no facts or something like that. So we don't want it to make it a new certainty. Or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really powerful, I think, because I'm trying to think of a good, not to go too long into a example from Jikang, but Jikang, he has this essay on like something like 十四 no, 论 or something, discarding 四 privateness, selfishness, the opposed to the public. And basically his whole argument is like be open about yourself, even your worst desires, and then the public or like others will correct them. Whereas if you hide your dark parts, you
Mm.
you can't be corrected. And uh, even if you are corrected, it'll be for something that isn't wrong, and it won't actually teach you to work on what you need to work on. But I mean, might be too. He also got killed maybe for being too open about. He was very loyal to a friend who was slandered, and he like spoke up dangerously against him. He kind of openly shunned the attention of like disrespected people who were more superior to him. So I like one thing I am thinking about, and this your presentation was helping me with, is this idea of like th- bearing, bearing as much uncertainty as you can bear, rather than this idea of it being a new sort of ascetic burden, right? Um, we got to be more Taoist, and so we got to just force ourselves to be uncertain, um, which would be, as Tyler pointed out, a whole new kind of certainty, the certainty of uncertainty. But rather, what you said, all I'm
Yeah.
just saying is that I really like that. But anyway, yeah, so I'm going on about that because I really am interested. But back to the question. Okay, maybe I'll just ask. Okay, one more comment. It's not so much a question, but just a comment. Something that developed from last time is this sort of tension between curiosity as wanting to find out something new and the Zhuangzi as being, quote unquote, anti-finding out things, just leaving things undiscovered, just staying in the ignorance. Is that something that you pointed out here in one of your slides was that curiosity is finding out something new in a certain context? And I think that's perfect. That just solves the problem. I'm just praising you again. Like that just solves the problem right there in a sense of curiosity in the Zhuangzi. Curiosity can still be this desire to know, but it's the desire to know in a new context, in a context that it wasn't known before. And once you get that
Mm.
knowledge, you can desire another context too. It's a never-ending expansion of contexts. So yeah, you just beautifully solved a question I had for you last time. So well done. Okay, the two questions I have, I don't know how much time I have, but they're both textual. So can we go to the first
Mm.
story that you looked at?
Yeah.
Um, so here, I'll ask them together. The first one is, I heard Siyu talking words which are great, but had nothing corresponding to them in reality. Once gone, they could not be brought back. What were his words? He responded, far away, there dwelt a spirit like man, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's already funny, right? They once
Mm-hmm.
gone, these words cannot be brought back. They have nothing corresponding to them. So then it's weird that he's asked to tell what the words are, and he does. So how do you deal? It's a typical Zhuangzian paradox. So how do you look at that? And then a very similar thing in the last one in Zhibeiyou, um, the last story you looked at, Zhibeiyou, right, has this great thing that Zhi is looking for the Tao, and basically knowinghood and no doing, no saying, and all these strange characters. Um, the Yellow Emperor talks about who is more right and who is less right. But this one is not in you didn't quote it, but at the end of the passage, I'm reading from Zipporah here. Um, when Wild and Twisty, who's one of these people who's more right than the Yellow Emperor about the Tao, when Wild and Twisty heard about this conversation, he concluded that the Yellow Emperor was a man who truly knew all about words. So
Uh,
the
Dumping
story
action.
concludes. Sorry?
I think dumping action. We
Yes.
concluded that dumping action you
No,
not here
no.
in. Oh.
That's the funny thing. So the story, the Zhuangzi ends by saying, or this passage ends by saying, when Wild and Twisty heard about this conversation, he concluded the Yellow Emperor was a man who knew
Okay.
all about words. Again, yeah, exactly. It's really weird. So what do you make of these paradoxes in these tales? The first one being his words have nothing, they once gone, they can't be brought back, and then he says them, he brings them back. And the second one being that the Yellow Emperor is the lowest character here, but at the end of the passage, he's kind of praised. Yeah, it's just my.
Mm. So I think that for the first passage, I think that's why it's important that to have this kind of wonder and this unsettling feeling that the distance nicely describes. The unsettling feeling of knowing, but also not being certain, but also knowing and not knowing. So I think this does not stop us from making questions. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is total rejection of um, the words. So I think he's trying to understand them because he sees the spirit like man as something he could probably believe in, but he doesn't really. So that's why I think there is some kind of wondering, but I do not think this is a total rejection of his words. And that's why he asked the question. So he's not being too certain about something because he says, I do not understand that it seems like that. He doesn't say his opinion. So it's like this and not like that. I think he's a little bit ambivalent. So that's why I think he asked because he is interested in a way. And then the last passage, so I read that passage like a month ago, and then what I remembered was the next passage was, which is the same actually, that Huang Di, he asks Huang Di why didn't Damping, who knew it from these two, and Huang Di says, well, Damping actually knew it because when you don't speak, it's better. But then I didn't remember the last part that you said, that he at the end he says that Huang Di actually is the master of words, right? So I'm not very sure what to make about this paradox, at least right now. I don't know if you had an idea or if you just like the fact that you found it very strange.
Yeah, what's the one corresponding to wild and twisty? Zipporah calls the second character wild and twisty. What is it in your translation there? Um, do you know?
Uh,
You have dumb. There's three characters, right? Dumb in action, yellow
oh
emperor,
yeah,
and what?
yeah, heedless blurter.
Okay. I think that's Wild and Twisty. Yeah, so it's
Mm-hmm.
Heedless Blurter who says after Huang Di says, Dumb in Action knew it, Heedless Blurter was halfway there, and you and I have nothing, or something like that. Heedless
Mm-hmm.
Blurter then heard about this and says, El Emperor was a man who truly knew all about words. I mean, the easiest way
Oh,
to get rid of that is to get rid of the problem is just to say, he knows all about words. Words are bad. Problem solved. But I think it's more than that, as with everything Zhuangzi. So, I don't have an answer either. But yeah, what you've been saying is already very helpful.
heedless blurter is someone who is very he's very quick to answer. He doesn't sit and think a little bit. So I think it makes sense that he says that Huang Di knows about work because this is the obvious in the sense of, yeah, he responded. So what's the first thing I'm going to say? He's great, right? So that's why he's also, I like the translation of heedless blurter as well. So maybe this is a way to think about it. That's the first
Nice,
thing that will come to someone's mind.
nice. Yeah, I don't know how we're doing on time, but maybe I'll leave it to Tyler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So I guess Taylor could share some of your ideas, comments, or questions with us, and please be mindful of the time to ensure that the third presentation has sufficient time. So Taylor, please.
Okay. Thanks so much, Anastasia. This helped me understand your project a lot better than I had initially. Can you go to the next slide, to slide 11?
I love it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this first first bullet point here kind of set off my Kant radar a little bit. I don't think you mean this at
Kant?
all, but I just want to
Okay.
briefly explain why this made me uh, think. So, I mean, you're saying across these encounters, inquiries does not progress toward a stable answer, but repeatedly encounters the limits of what structured questioning can deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, you could imagine the way that this could be read in sort of like a Kantian way, in the sense that, when finite cognition tries to overstep the boundaries of our finite experience, then reason gets, necessarily entangled in a series of intractable antinomies, contradictions, which is proof that our reason cannot reach reality as it is in itself. Therefore, inquiry comes upon a limit and draws back and is made secure in the coherence of finite reason because it has encountered that limit and drawn back from it, right? But over the course of the rest of your presentation, it becomes clear that that's not what you think, that we're dealing with a different kind of limit, right? So you tell us that curiosity does not aim to eliminate uncertainty, but unfolds within it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a temporary stage toward knowledge, as maybe it sort of is in Plato. Like I'm thinking of that classic Thucydides passage where he says that like thaumazein is like the beginning of every true philosophy.
Yeah.
But of course, in that case, it's presupposed that there is some eternal truth to be known that can be clarified, that we can bring our own cognitive apparatus into coincidence with. And then lastly, you say curiosity is not an orientation towards closure, but a mode of engagement that remains open to what continually exceeds it. So it sounds like the fact that we can't grasp reality as whole in virtue, it doesn't mean that it's somehow beyond our reach, but that somehow what there is to be known is intrinsically non-all, intrinsically antagonistic, intrinsically open, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to sort of reorient this capacity for curiosity
Mm-hmm.
to almost like, yeah, like walk two ways between certainty and uncertainty, right? And as I'm happy that both of you have already mentioned, saying that there's no certainty is just a certainty with respect to
Yeah.
non-certainty, right? So somehow the only uncertainty to be found is amidst various relatively certain perspectival transformations, and the only way to be certain is to somehow go into this openness at the heart of structured reality and find ourselves at home there, right? Huanzhong, like take up in the middle, turning out, infinite shures and infinite phase. So my question to you is, what do you mean encounter the limit of what structuring questioning can deliver? So, I mean, I guess I have a couple passages that sort of came to mind in trying to think this through and try to come up with a way that you don't mean this in the Kantian sense that of which I gave cheap rehearsal a moment ago. So I'm thinking first of all of this passage from the Tuolun, right? I'm gonna actually share it in the everybody chat rather than just sending it to you this time. So people will know this passage, I'm assuming. 知之其所不知，知矣. So when understanding or consciousness, knowing, when it comes to rest in what it does not know, then that's it. Then it has reached the unsurpassable limit, right? The utmost. 殊之不言之辩，不道之道。若有能之，特之谓天赋. So I think, I mean, just thinking through this topic and what a state of like, truth would mean in the Zhuangzi. I mean, there are these figures that kind of all of these like hapax legomena that sort of are scattered throughout the inner chapters, right? All of the ones from the Tuolun with like Tianjun and Huanzhong, and then we have Tianfu, right, in this passage, right? If there is somebody that could know in this way, in which their zhi comes to zhi in their bu zhi, then this would be like a heavenly reservoir, right? That we can pour into without it ever filling up. entirely and spilling over, and that we can ladle out of without it ever becoming exhausted. There's also a similar passage in or little character in the De Fu that we're talked about. He talks about the Ling Fu, right? The numinous reservoir that almost kind of goes back to Ben's paradox of Wuqing. He speaks of it as as like as something that's something like an interstate that is somehow impervious to the disruption of shurs and feis, right? This is what he calls the numinous reservoir, right? The Lingfu. So is that kind of the sort of limit at stake here? This knowing coming to rest in that which it does not know. Also thinking of the kind of there are two rhyming passages. One of them is in the Qiwulun, the other one's in the Dazhong. In the Qiwulun, Zhuangzi says, what is it? Fu yan chui fei ye, right? That speaking is not just the blowing of air, right? Yan zhe you yan. Speech has something of which it speaks, but qi suo yan zhe te wei ding ye, right? That of which it speaks is peculiarly unfixed. And then there's kind of a passage that reorients this same idea into a slightly different register in the Dazhong Shi. And I happen to have this one ready. 夫之有所待而后当，其所待者特谓定也. So it's that same 特谓定也 that it's now being predicated not of that which is spoken, but rather of that upon which knowledge depends on, right? So if there's any place where Zhuangzi speaks of like knowledge of the true, which is a bad translation of Zhenzhi, it's here. And interestingly, this Zhenzhi character sort of famously only shows up once right at the beginning of the chapter, and then from that point on, the only thing that we talk about is Zhenren and the sort of person that would embody this knowledge. But in both of these cases, whether it's speaking of something that is peculiarly unfixed, or knowledge having that upon which it depends be peculiarly unfixed, it seems like we're dealing with a limit, right? Like an intractable limit. Even if we can't get rid of there being something upon which we depend. So I don't know. So these two examples are kind of slightly different forms of a limit. And I don't know whether either of them corresponds with what you are telling us here with this statement that inquiry repeatedly encounters the limits of what structuring questioning can deliver. So yeah, what sort of a limit do you have in mind here?
So the first thing I thought about was where this came from is that some passages that they seem to say when someone is asking a question and then figures do not respond, or they say go away, I do not know, is that there is a correct and not so correct way to go about things and to ask about things. And so these structured questions like what is the Tao, how to know it, how to follow it, is not the correct way. That's how, but maybe I didn't write it completely clearly, or this is a bad way of phrasing it. But yeah, this was my initial thought. There were some passages that I didn't incorporate in my talk today because there was no time. But yeah, there is some kind of limit also in language in turn, let's say. I think.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think we're basically at time. The one last thing that I wanted to point out, if you could go to the previous slide.
Okay.
Just looking at your translation of this passage, the very last little bit, this 无从无道是得道. You translate this as to start from nowhere and pursue no path is the first step toward making the Tao your own. I wonder if this doesn't sort of generate the paradox of trying to say that there is no true Tao, or that there is no true beginning of the path, right? No Thalmat saying at the beginning of all philosophy. I wonder if, so
Yeah.
that Hong there, obviously that can be like Hong like, whence I came from. But I think it can also just mean follow, right? So what if we were to just kind of like read this in a slightly less kind of emphatic way and to say that when there is nothing in particular that we follow, or when we follow nothing in particular, and pursue no path in particular, then we begin to attain the Tao, right? So rather than saying we start from nowhere or we begin in some beginningless locus, saying just begin wherever you are, right? There will be a sure and a fei, and that is the Tao will unfold from the locus of that initial
yes,
construct.
wherever you happen to
Wherever you
be
happen to
at.
be.
Yeah, I think that your own is actually not a great translation. I also do not, I use James Leggett translation. I do not agree with everything, but there were some things I liked. So some things I didn't like, I did not erase them, just to not be very, to not make it my own, because then I had to do the whole thing my own. So I just didn't erase it. But yeah, yeah, I also very much like foreign translations. But yeah, for some reasons I chose Legge here. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, your own is a little bit, yeah, it's not
excited to see how this project develops and transforms.
Thank you. Great.
Okay, thanks for the inspiring discussion. Now we'll proceed to the third presentation. Taylor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully that's possible.
Yeah.
Okay. Need to make you small. I'm gonna put you off to the side. Forgive me for that. Okay, so I guess by way of introduction, my name is Tyler. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Chicago Divinity School. I actually work mostly on Tiantai Buddhism, sort of in a transvaluational cross-cultural vantage, but I'm not going to talk about that today. In fact, I'm not going to talk about really anything. Ben and Anastasia both kind of are talking about their, like precis, like dissertation topics. I'm going to take us in a completely different direction in a sort of free and far-flung wandering. So this is my opening question. What can the fragmentations betokening full virtuosity chapter, i.e. the Zhuangzi, tell us about Donald Trump? And does this comparison force us to admit that Donald Trump is the genuine pretender of our times? So first of all, who are the crippled sages that we encounter there? Each of the chapter's 5 sections introduces us to a character who is mutilated. Their missing limbs and broken bodies are, however, excessively signified. A body that is branded by penal mutilation, like cutting off your foot, is laid bare for all to see as a sign of deficient virtue, Triada. And yet kingly crowbait, we're told, Wang Tai, I'm using Zipporah's names here because they're cute. And yet kingly crowbait views the chopping off of his foot as nothing more than the casting away of a clump of soil. So Shan Tuzia, for his part, is also a criminal punished with an amputated foot, but as soon as he arrives at his master's place, everything falls away, bringing him back to where he'd started from. So in the presence of his master, it is as if Shan Tuzia comes to be at a loss for this loss, lacking for this lack. And in place of his missing foot, Shan Tuzia tells us he nevertheless retains something more than a foot, which he is trying to keep whole. So the wholeness of his replete virtue not only goes unaffected by his mutilation, but indeed must pass through it before it can emerge from the loss of this loss of a foot. So like the cripples and criminals from chapter 5, Donald Trump's symbolic efficiency likewise must pass through the mutilation his image suffers. In the aftermath of every day's humiliations, which expose his every hypocrisy and impotency, Trump retains something more than an intact image. 又有尊相者存. Like kingly probate and 臣徒家, Donald Trump fosters in his person the effects of a power from which he should be disqualified by his countless shortcomings. But let his image be mutilated, shattered, and cast to pieces. Let him be, in the relevant sense, castrated. We remain all the more under the hold of his seduction, and therefore complicit in it, as if we were forced to want it. Like everyone who comes into the sphere of Horsehead Humpback's aura, it is as if we can think of nothing else and find ourselves unable to depart from him. 死而不能出也. In the figure of Donald Trump, castration, which is an ostensive loss, becomes a moment internal to the appearance of power. It doesn't matter how many of his sham companies go bankrupt or how many of the evils he decries in the world are shown to be his own truest face. Every scandal, blemish, or mockery that would have sullied the image of a traditional ruler only adds further shine to Trump's. The motley crew of genuine pretenders we encounter in Chapter 5 of the Zhuangzi, despite their mangled and mutilated outer forms, nevertheless exhibit superhuman virtuous efficacy. But this does not, however, come from matching external role to inner commitment in the mode of the Mengzian ideal man. It comes instead, Muller and D'Ambrosio argue, from a humorous subversion of this very ethical constellation. Mengzi's ideal man is charged with filling out a series of social names and roles. The Confucian ethic both inaugurates a distance between the subject and the social role and burdens the subject with the demand to collapse this same distance. But this is my question. Is the gap in question located exclusively on the side of the subject, or are we prepared to think of the same gap between actor and mask, articulated too on the side of the mask itself? So when, as Adorno puts it, Hitler's followers, or for that matter, Trump's MAGA faithful, identify with him, they identify not with the leader per se, but rather with the leader's performance of his own ideal image. In this way, the same gap between internal actuality and external name or role, which it had fallen solely on the Mengzian ideal man qua subject to collapse, opens up on the side of the mask itself. So that now the very thing being identified with is likewise split between the role and its own knowing performance. In Donald Trump, surely one of the great pretenders in human history, pretense comes to be internal to the role itself. But this does not mark a decline in the symbolic efficiency of state and ideology. It signals instead, we might think, a new self-reflexive mode of sovereignty's functioning. So kingly probate and Shantujia exact a first dialectical twist in the subversion of the image of the Mengzian ideal man. They are, to begin with, rid of the obsession with adopting a face and a true form, and what's more, they exude outstanding virtuosity precisely by relinquishing the demand to approach a perfect tally between inner actuality and external names. And what's more, this very exhibited distance between name and actuality paradoxically becomes the functioning source of their efficacy. Kingly probate, Shantujia, and Donald Trump all have this much in common. They all evince their attractive power from a certain lack displayed in the place of something severed. Though they are missing it, they remain impervious to the effects of this loss. As Lai Xishan puts it, shout out Lai Xishan in his new 那篇新解新事新引 he tells us 一般人只看到流失，却没有看到流失于更新的二而不二之同体相即性，看到死亡，却没有看到死亡与再生的二而不二的同体相即性。So there's a kind of paradoxical coincidence, belongingness together of loss and regeneration that I think is at stake here in both the characters of the Zhuangzi and Trump and his various imitators in the landscape of contemporary geopolitics. So Trump, I want to say, figures a further unexpected twist in this comical subversion of Mengzi's ideal man. Trump is very obviously not, like kingly probate and Shantujia, freed from the demand to measure up to the phallic emblem of his own brand name. Trump, I can look outside my window on Wabash Street and see stupid, ugly, giant Trump building. It's somehow can never escape from it. The shadow of this man in our lives. And Trump obviously sees himself in the ridiculous, larger-than-life image of the reality TV show Superboss, which, of course, he actually played for many years on his show The Apprentice. He's, of course, obsessed with measuring up to the image of the big, strong, powerful boss, the omnipotent maker of deals and ender of wars, etc. In Trump's own sagely words, nothing bad can happen. It can only good happen. Don't worry, that's if that doesn't make sense, 不是英文的错误. But it is not enough to simply state that Trump displays an idiotic obsession with being a winner and not a loser. Trump's multifaceted inadequacy to the ideal his own brand name represents becomes internal to the functioning efficiency of the latter. Trump is, we might imagine, released from his fetters to exactly the degree that he strings together his death and his life, threads his possibility together with his impossibility. Trump's own political and cultural ascent has obviously been strung together by a seemingly endless barrage of failures and world historical humiliations. And yet here he is. Here he sits as the most powerful man in human history, with the nuclear launch code in his, in his back pocket. Within the coordinates of the Mengtian ethic of the ideal man, a mutated image cannot but signal a shortcoming of virtuosity. Likewise, according to the classical logic of sovereignty and symbolic power, if you defame the king's image, you disgrace the king. You remove the emperor's clothes. But in Trump's paradoxical universe, let his image be castrated, defame it all you want. It was already castrated from the outset. Trump, like Shantujia and co. from chapter 5, reconfigures what, in the Confucian ethic, can only come across as a failure. Only through the displayed gap between his person and the role he is trying to assume does he become the bearer of a power that exceeds his own person. The message of chapter 5, at least in part, is that an unfixed, mobile subjectivity qua genuineness, responsive like a mirror and yet ever bent on subversion, empowers kingly probate Shantujia and co. to paradoxically unite a series of opposites: sickness and health, defamation and reputation, mutilation and full superhuman intactness. But how then can Trump, this doppelganger of a genuine pretender, in the complete absence of the relevant genuine subjectivity, be likewise empowered with the capacity to unite such opposites in his own person? Where kingly probate and Shantujia are completely free from pretense, Trump represents something instead like the appearance of pure pretense on the stage of world history. Trump generates the paradoxical effect of a genuine pretender not by letting go of all pretense, like kingly probate, Shantujia, and co. Rather, he does it through exactly the opposite means, by pushing pure pretense all the way to its comical breaking point. But then, perhaps Donald Trump is something instead like the opposite of one of these genuine pretenders from chapter 5. He indeed has the power not to be transferred away when all other things are, 不以无天, but this is not because he alone, like the sage, like cripples from chapter 5, discerns the unborrowed, 生乎无家. Quite to the contrary, he has become incapable of being defamed by clinging to the fully borrowed 家 dimension of his own phallic image. Or is the genuine pretender perhaps, like a mirror, even capable of admitting an opposite? So mustn't the genuine pretender, like a mirror, already be identical to any prospective opposite that might come to face with it? To borrow an expression from Guoxiang's commentary to the Tiwalum, the genuine pretender stands opposed to nothing under heaven as another. 未尝有对于天下也. In other words, perhaps a mirror and a genuine pretender cannot have a double, or it must already be its own double. By analogy, then, a genuine pretender is not a role that can be drawn in contrast to any other or indexed to any standard to which one might be judged adequate or inadequate. How, therefore, could it be possible to distinguish between what is and what is not a true genuine pretender without relapsing into the very trap of authenticity from which the genuine pretender provides a way out? So Trump and his various imitators forces us to confront this threat of indistinction between the genuine pretender and its own doppelganger. And I realize, I'm kind of baiting Professor D'Ambrosio a little bit with all of this. The genuine pretender is not. It's not like we go through all of the various candidates for genuine pretending and determine which one of them is real. It's something that is somehow latent within all of us that can be obscured or covered over, and there are various ways of understanding that. So if we don't want to say that Donald Trump is a genuine pretender, then basically this raises the question of what possible distinction could possibly be adduced to draw him apart from one. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that, and bounce things over to my two interlocutors. Stop my screen share.
Okay, thank you, Taylor, for delivering a lecture that has considerable real-world significance. Now maybe Benjamin has something to share with us.
Thanks so much, Tyler and Angela. Yeah, this is great. I get to be the Zhong responder here. It seems between the presentation and the next every time, which is nice. Yeah, oh man, there's so many things. I'm just really chewing on the last bit of your presentation. Sorry, I just have it here. That's where the the tiles and crap really hit the fan, I think. Um, so I'm still kind of chewing on this opposition, not opposition, this interesting contrast that you um, draw between we have an interesting sorry, just saying the comment question about the semantics, which is also I also noticed that word, so that's a relevant question. Um, yeah, sorry, still trying to collect my thoughts here. So this interesting contrast you draw between the genuine pretender and his doppelganger, the one who clings to the jia, whatever, however we want to interpret it or translate it, um, rather than discerns the wujia. A paradox of wujia, you might say, right? Of jia and wujia. Yeah, I guess my first thing while I keep collecting my thoughts is something I've thought about in relation to both the Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi for a long time is something like voluntariness, which is as a ethical criterion. Um, you could think in very general terms of Huang Yong's copper rule: do not do to others what they do not want you to do to them, or something. Do not, or maybe it's positively formulated. I can't remember. Do to others what they want you to do to them, right? Not what you would want to do to them, or what you would not want to have not done to you, or whatever. So, the interesting thing is, of course, that Taoism is often, and in fact, much Chinese and non-Western philosophy, and pre-Christian philosophy is just cast as not having a distinction between, free will or free choice and choice, and that being a sort of, post-Christian invention. So, um, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is for Donald Trump, uh, he, the easiest, counter to him that would come to mind, and to all authoritarians, um, is this image, both especially in Lao Tzu, but I think also in Zhuangzi in different parts of these texts, not to say that they're fully consistent. Hopefully they aren't actually, otherwise they would be inconsistent if they were consistent. Um, is that it's amoral. It's explicitly both texts question shan, they question shi, they question how, liking, affirming, and valuing. But there is this constant idea that, when the granaries are empty, far is this from Tao, right? When the wealthy are clothed, this is Tao Te Ching now, and the people are poor, this isn't Tao. And there's this linking, and I think it's more subtle, but I think it's there in Zhuangzi too, that if you have these crippled figures, um, it doesn't interfere with other people so much. Whereas Trump, I mean, very, again, explicitly, gladly interferes with others. And I'm trying to articulate this in a way of this Taoism is a radical affirmation that affirms everyone else's affirmation or something like this, um, without falling into, yeah, Kantian or Rawlsian mere kind of um, liberalism, where, you know, everything goes so long as it's mediated by what goes for me doesn't impinge as much as possible on what goes for you. Yeah, so I have some other thoughts, but I'm wondering, that's one place I'm always wondering, because that is something very different from Trump, and not all, but most, right? There's like Robert Jur who kills thousands of people, but most exemplars in Zhuangzi, including this chapter.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do you think that Trump is like trying to interfere? I mean, obviously he's like going and like kidnapping the like leaders of sovereign nations, but there's almost like a haphazardness, you know? And again, I'm not trying to defend Trump,
Mhm.
obviously, but you know, is he trying to interfere with people, or is he just kind of 随心所欲and then people fall by the wayside?
Right. Yeah, totally. So I think the point in the quote unquote classical Lao Zhuang is that people who 随心所欲 don't, you know, in the deep, genuine pretender sense, tend to not, you know, with some exceptions, admittedly, in the Zhuangzi, you know, miscellaneous chapters case and so on, um, they tend not to go out and kidnap people and execute them and lock them in concentration camps.
Yeah, fair. Um, right. So, I mean, maybe that could be a direction in which we could move to try to isolate and to sort of raise up a distinction between them. I realize we're kind of running out of time here. I just want to quickly address the comments here. So I was using the Zipporah translation for Wujia for unborrowed. And I actually don't think that so yeah, 无所凭借 is like basically that which is without a basis, that which is without a fixed point of dependence. And then Angela gives us this yeah, so 无家就是无所 yeah, right, okay. 即无所待. So 家 is basically die, right? And I think that is we could think that. So I guess I'm thinking of borrowed in in that light, right? So if there is yoso dai, then there is something we can grasp, something we can borrow from the eternal transformations of day and night and Shi and Fei, and take as the basis upon which we stand, right? And Trump is trying to do that. He's trying to die. He's trying to, with respect to his own brand name and image, he's trying to have yoso dai. And so my question is, of course, given that he's obviously incapable of usodai and just, you know, wandering free and unfettered in the transformation of the six breaths, then how is it that he is still capable of uniting these series of paradoxical opposites within his person? Okay, I'm gonna stop there and give the floor.
Yeah, so let's welcome how to say Anastasia to share some of her opinions or questions. Welcome.
Yeah. Sorry for the time that we took. I think we are a little bit late in general.
It's okay.
So
Anastasia, we'll just go to about 15 after, right? So we'll have like about
okay,
20 more minutes because we started a little bit late. So you guys just take your
okay.
time.
Yeah, so I really liked, I think it's a very nice paper. I don't know if you published it already, but I really, really liked it. And I think it's very much multi-layered, um, which is great. I was thinking that, well, just a couple of things. First, if the Trump part of his job basically is this visibility, attention, performance. Yeah, it seems to be very central to his role. But these figures, they actually do not seek any kind of validation or audience. Maybe they maybe the opposite as well. I'm not sure if we can say that, maybe in some other passages, but I'm not sure. So I was thinking if this is, in what sense then it becomes comparable, because not only, the Trump is very much wants an audience and a lot of people to give attention to him and listen to him. Yeah, that's part of his job. So these figures just seem very liberated, let's say, from the desire to be recognized by others. So if it's, in what sense we can compare them, then that's my first comment. And then maybe it's too obvious, but there are some other passages also. I had, I think, one of these passages that there are people that are whole and then their virtue is whole. And then these are the mutilated people, but their virtue is whole. I was thinking if it is more whole than the people who are actually whole in their body as well, or if the mutilation or the punishment that they escaped was just a part of luck of their life circumstances. And if it is, then can we say that this mutilation is very important or significant? I'm not trying to diminish that. I was just wondering. Quite the opposite.
Yeah, thank you. Those are two really great, rich questions. So the first one, vis-a-vis Trump's very obvious desire to gain recognition, right? And he even sometimes will say, like, I don't care what they think. Of course, telling us that that's what he thinks, that he doesn't care what we think. And yeah, I mean, right, there's that passage that describes the mirror-like sort of like subjectivity of these kind of broken, fragmented characters from the Zhuangzi, you know, a mirror that welcomes all things in and pushes nothing out, right? It doesn't need to be recognized, doesn't desire to be recognized. And so I mean that's part of my whole question here. And I mean for this to be kind of like clickbaity, as Ben says, and provocative. Like, how could it be that he's literally the person who perhaps cares most about what others think of all of the people in the history of humanity? He's so clearly obsessed with his own perception. You know, you can think of him watching, you know, like 5 hours of cable news per day, you know, just like obsessed with whether the fake news media is like covering him fairly, right? The very concept of like fake news emerged out of Trump's own dissatisfaction with his lack of recognition, right? Fake news is just a word for somebody that says something mean about Trump, right? Somebody that doesn't correspond with his own image by which he would hope to be recognized. So yeah, I mean, given that there is, you know, so the characters from chapter 5, they all are able to evince this power by being completely free of all pretense, whereas Trump, and here's kind of the mystery of it, is how could he seemingly have fostered the same power in his person, not by becoming free of all pretense, but rather by pushing pretense to its like comical breaking point, you know, rather than being free of all pretense, he's like pure pretense that has emerged onto the stage of world history, right? He is a figure that is nothing but pretense. So that is just to emphasize the mystery. And then your second question, which is, sorry, I'm trying to remind myself.
If this mutilation, like
mutilation,
some other, but
yes.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a really great point. So I take it your question is, given that I've put forward this hypothesis that whether it's Shen Tujia and Wang Tai and all of these guys or Trump, their 崇德, their replete virtuosity or their wholeness, their intactness must pass through the lack of a severed organ, right? I'm speaking sort of metaphorically of Trump having been castrated in a certain sense, and then of course Shen Tujia and Wang Tai that have lost a foot, right? Only from the locus of this lack, only from the locus of what has come to be missing, are they able to evince their full intactness, right? And your question is that, are they now just normal, or do they now just have normally replete virtue, or are they somehow elevated above onto this like superhuman kind of like plane of intactness that is no longer, we could think of this, okay, all of this talk about, you know, the yosodai, wusodai sort of thing. It's like their wholeness, their virtue is no longer made dependent, you know, on having to display an outward form that corresponds with an inner state, right? So in that sense, both Trump and these characters from the Zhuangfu are wusodai, right? All of us, you know, if I were to show up with like, you know, a black eye or something, I would be anxious that all of you guys would judge me for it and think that I like get into fights out on the street or something. But you know, whether it's these characters from chapter 5 or Trump has this power to openly display his own shortcomings and impotencies and hypocrisies without it ever impacting him, right? He said before, I could walk out on the Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody in the face and my poll numbers would go up. So it's somehow only from this lack and vacancy in the place of something crucial, right, that they're able to weave their intactness together. So I think what I am trying to say is that they present an image of like replete and full virtuosity that has become entirely unfixed from the very project of adequating to a given role or standard.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess our audience also have some questions or comments. You may open your microphone or post your questions in our chat box. Okay, maybe I can put forth two questions at first. These questions are for Benjamin. You may choose one of them to answer, since the time is limit. Um, I'm curious about your understanding of 智 and desire. I guess you think first, people use 智 to control their desire, and then they have a proper desire, and then the desire will motivate them to act. But maybe we can understand the their relationship as the followings. I mean, the wisdom and the desire, they function simultaneously. Yeah, but wisdom can always reflect on or control the desires. This is my first question. I mean, the wisdom has a priority in logic rather than in time. My second question is about oh, the paradox of 无知 and 无情. I guess you mainly understand this psychological phenomenon from an individual perspective. What about understand them from a broader perspective, that is from the nature or the entire universe? So for individual, they might not have individual desires or emotions that can be decided by themselves completely. However, their emotions, desires, or wisdom align with the underlying Tao or Li in the universe. Yeah, I guess we can understand uncertainty from the same perspective. So for individuals, all the affairs in the universe are uncertain. So we feel like we don't know which principle we should follow. But from the perspective of Tao, all the things just happen in the proper way. Yeah, these are my two questions.
Thanks. For the first one, maybe you can try doing both, just because I think for the first one, I'm basically in agreement with you, except when I say they're differentiated by time, I don't mean they take place at different times. I mean that every moment that I want to say cognition, but people will assume if I say cognition, I mean thinking. I mean just your consciousness, right? Or your body is functioning. You're perceiving the world all three aspects are always already involved. And a million aspects, but the desire is involved. But when you perceive something, you automatically like, don't like, or don't care about it. All three are, value states. That impression already has some sort of emotion in you, as in like that desire is already extended through some time, which is an emotion. You're happy if you get it, you're sad if you lose it. And you're already predicting whether or not it will last, whether or not you can get it, whether or not you should subordinate it to some other desire. So in every moment, you're always doing all three. They're just different aspects of the same thing. Maybe xing, like 人性, right? Xunzi or Zhuxi, I forget which they say, xing, uh, fa is qing or something. I'm butchering it, but there's these things about you have xing and it's affected, and then it's emotion, it's desire. Anyway, so I think that's just an agreement with you. I'm not saying something different, but maybe for the second part, um I'm curious what you mean by like the proper functioning of the universe, or like you have like maybe no desires individually, but you have some deeper desire for the universe or something. Sorry, I'm not quite sure what you're proposing as the alternative to um having no desire or having desire or qing or emotion.
Yes. Yeah, usually when we see we have desires, yes, just we have some desires by ourselves. It is mainly or entirely decided by ourselves. But for Jikang, maybe he want people to have desires that do not conflict with Tao or the nature. So it's not completely decided by individuals. It's more like an interaction between individuals and the entire world.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
great. So really,
so yeah. So from a broader perspective, there is no paradox.
yeah. So really quickly, response to that is that yeah, Jikang is maybe interesting in that maybe he wouldn't actually say you should be Wu Yu. He sometimes criticizes Yu and sometimes uh praises it as Xing Zhi Dong. And maybe if you say he praises it as Xing Zhi Dong, that is that deep, that wu si, that unselfish form of desire that you're talking about. So, but for him, that is, I think, that's the pure state of desire. Actually, for everyone, that's what we already share. And the problem of desire is the intelligence. Intelligence is the problem. Intelligence comes and makes the desire last longer. He says, I don't have time, but he literally says the problem with intelligence is it can anticipates, and then even when you get what you want, your wisdom, your zhihui is not satisfied. It tells you you should have this value and get it again and again. You had the food, you had money, you should get more and more, and that should be the meaning of your life. Whereas desire by itself, as in your desire, my desire, any the animal's desire, the tree's desire, by itself, it just gets something and then is enough, done, desire done. Then another desire comes, gets something, it just rises and falls, rise and falls. So that's the nature of desire in itself for Jikang. Is not bad. It's a good thing, but in its nature, it is the harmonious functioning of the universe. It's just the response of creatures to the universe. But it's always also conflicted by this predictive aspect. So the intelligence is the problem. Intelligence is not, good, but intelligence can be used to reduce intelligence. That's my paradox. Truth can be
Okay,
used to
thank you.
reduce truth. Yeah.
So anyone else want to give us some comments or questions? Or you maybe continue your previous questions if you want to.
Can I just say briefly for Tyler, that I guess just to go back to my question, the distinction between being free from pretense and fully embracing pretense, is that final distinction. I mean, I'm assuming it's not. Because if it isn't, then yes, I mean, I agree with you. We have to embrace Trump as a genuine pretender. He's not even a doppelganger in that sense, right? He just is a genuine pretender. Um, but then maybe we can say, that's great. If you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha. He's a Genren. That's great. As Zhuangzians, because Zen, Chan is obviously inspired by, to quote a very Taoist inspired, Zhuangzi inspired school Buddhism. If you meet the Genren, kill the Genren.
Yeah, hopefully nobody from the State Department watches this YouTube video. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't know. I mean, is it sort of, do we want to say that there's some kind of a Wuji Bifan sort of phenomenon with respect to freedom from pretense and like unlimited, like unbridled pretense? Maybe we do. And yeah, I mean, maybe Trump isn't the doppelganger of a genuine pretender. Maybe he just is one. And the point I was trying to make at the end is that it's not even conceptually coherent to think of the genuine pretender having an opposite in the first place. A mirror can't have an opposite because obviously anything that you place in front of it, it will immediately and indiscriminately reflect as its own, right? So in the same way that a mirror, as Guoxiang says, 未尝有对于天下也, in the same way that it has no counterpart under heaven, maybe Trump just introduces a new kind of like imminent wrinkle to the unfolding of the dialectic of the genuine pretender. So yeah, I mean, just trying to use this Zhuangzian idea to, express a curiosity, I guess we might say, about our current geopolitical predicament.
Okay, I guess we are running out of time, so maybe we can finish this discussion right now. And thanks for everyone's participation.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.